Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to another episode of Glass Half Full, a podcast and a safe platform where we talk with a variety of teachers, entrepreneurs, spiritualists, uplifters, givers, shakers, and serenaders. Everyone has a lesson to learn and a lesson to share. Let's use our life experiences to enrich someone's heart, mind, spirit, and soul. Through sharing our experiences, we can be a learning inspiration for one another. I'm your host, Chris Levins. Let's welcome today's guest. Today's guest is Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson is the founder of Shameless Care. Let's welcome Robert Johnson. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Hello. Thank you so much for being a guest here on Glass Half Full. We're so happy to have you today.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask first, can you tell everyone where you are in the world and what time it is, please?
I live in the suburbs of Chicago in Illinois in the United States, and it's 9:02 a.m. on a Saturday here.
Excellent. The chick in the car and the car won't go. That's how you spell Chicago. That's how I learned how to spell it when I was a kid. We love that. Awesome. Thank you for your time today. How's the weather?
It's beautiful. You know, our winters are tough, but our summers are beautiful. So it's a beautiful time of year right now.
Oh, nice. Excellent. Excellent. I love that. Well, we're going to jump right on in. I like to ask all my guests this first question. I feel that our lives are in spiritual design. Can you share your life layout or blueprint with everyone? This is where you grew up, your family lifestyle.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up, I graduated high school in 1998, and that was an interesting culture, a little rougher than I think it is now
I agree.
in some ways. And I also grew up in the what I would term the country, in a trailer house in rural Southwest Missouri. And, I was taught to work, and my dad is he has dementia and not in very good health. You better believe if he's physically able to, he's out on the farm working every day.
Wow.
And I think that's pretty ingrained in me as well, but in a slightly different way. And that's why whenever I see a problem with something that I can fix, then I'm inclined to try to fix it, even if it doesn't make logical sense or sense to anybody else in my family or even self-worth. And I think that's kind of where we are today with the company. So I'm not sure if that answered your question properly or not, but
you definitely started. Tell us a little bit more about the person that you are. Like, do you have siblings? Did you guys have a dog, a cat? Did you have a bird? Where did you go to school? What kind of degrees do you have? Tell us about who you are.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Well,
yes,
I do have a sister.
Okay.
And one of the things that's potentially interesting about my childhood for people who are listening is that I grew up in such a rural part of the country that there were 5 kids in my elementary school class, and one teacher taught 2 grades at the same time. Now, I know when I say that, it's going to sound like I'm 147 years old, and this was back in the 1800s, but it really wasn't. It was in the 1990s. It was just that small of a school.
5 kids in the class?
Yeah, absolutely. And the same teacher teaching 2 grades at the same time. So if you were in 3rd grade, you were also getting a little bit of a 4th grade education and so on and so forth. And so that was really interesting. And then whenever I went to high school, that was a much larger school. I got bused to a much larger school with about 40 kids per class. And I thought you had dropped me off in the middle of Manhattan. It just seemed so big and so many people. And of course, this was pre-internet, or at least before I had access to the internet. So the world was just smaller in general. But ended up going to college and then married my wife. My wife is a veterinarian. She went to college a little bit longer than I did.
Where did you go to school?
Married, and I went to school at Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri.
All right, Missouri State. Hey.
Yeah, absolutely. The Ozarks. Yep.
Yes. Nice. So you met your wife in university?
Yeah.
Oh,
basically.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. And you said she's a veterinarian?
She is. Yeah. So she went to school a little bit longer than me. So the first part of our marriage was me working and her, going to school, and wouldn't trade those years for anything. It was wonderful.
Nice. And do you guys have any children?
We do. Yeah, we have a daughter who's in school here in the Chicago suburbs, and unlike me, she loves school, which I think is which I think is great because you have to do it. So what a blessing it is to actually love it
It is really true. You're right.
and enjoy it instead of having to fight your way through it, which is pretty much what my elementary school experience was like.
I love that. I love that. Okay, and so let's talk about your story. So I know it's something deeply personal, but through your mind, when you realized about this story and all the things that happened, I want you to tell everyone exactly what has happened about the STD. Can you tell us the story, please?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So I am consensually non-monogamous, and I know that's a term that most of your audience wouldn't have heard before. But
Yes, please
essentially,
explain.
it means exactly kind of what it sounds like. I think most of your listeners would know what monogamy is, and then there's non-monogamy, and believe me, there's plenty of people out there who are non-consensual non-monogamous, meaning they're doing things outside of their relationship, but they're the only one that knows about it.
Called
and
cheating.
That's certainly
Okay.
a different situation. Yeah, it's called cheating. Yeah, that's certainly a different conversation altogether.
Yes, indeed.
But anyway, that'll explain how this middle-aged man on the interview right now ended up getting an STI. And I'd been getting an STI test every 6 months, just completely proactively, screening. You always hear your entire life that's the responsible thing to do. And so that's what I was doing. And then one day I had a partner text me and tell me that she thought I had given her gonorrhea. And I was really surprised by that for two reasons. One was I felt absolutely fine. But the other one was that I was looking at this negative STI test result from just a week prior that, I look at gonorrhea on the page and I scroll my finger over and it says negative. So it's like, okay, well, I'm sorry that happened, but it probably wasn't me. And she said, have you ever been throat swab tested? And I just thought, what the hell is that? I had gotten STI tested from urgent cares, my family physician, online places. It was always just a blood test, Chris, and a urine test. And for me as a male, that was all it ever was. And so I thought, okay. And I get on Google at that point and I'm looking. It's like, okay, well, oral swabs are definitely a thing. Like, she's absolutely right about this. I better go get this checked out. What really floored me then was how hard that was to accomplish. So I went to one physician, my family doctor, and sometimes doctors, I work with doctors every day now. And, sometimes doctors just won't know something, but it's kind of hard for them to be like, I don't know.
It is really, I guess it's pride. I don't know, but it's true. You're right.
So he clearly didn't know what it was, but didn't say that exactly out loud. I was just reading between the lines, but he said, don't worry. If you had oral gonorrhea, you would also have it genitally. So don't even worry about this. Basically just go home. I'm paraphrasing slightly for comedic effect, but that was the gist of it. The second doctor knew what it was and he ordered it. But then I went down to the lab in the bottom of the medical building. People listening will have to imagine this huge medical building with all of these doctors' offices and then one lab at the basement that all the doctors feed their patients to. And down there was a phlebotomist, a lab worker, who this was not a young woman. It was clearly not her first day on the job. She knew what she was doing, but she didn't know what a throat swab test was and wouldn't do it. She had never done one in her career, which I have to assume was decades old. And I started putting two and two together and just thought, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? If people are having, unprotected relations, I'll try to keep this as I can.
It's fine. We're adults here.
Okay. Well, if people are having unprotected oral sex, which a lot of people do, even people who pretty religiously reach for that condom for, what might be considered to be the main event, a lot of those people have unprotected oral sex. And then if we're telling those people to get STI tested, but they're not being tested for the very place they're most likely to have one of these infections, then that's a huge problem. And I just could not get that out of my head because I used to have a public health consulting company. And I worked a lot with like childhood obesity grants and projects and things like that. And the truth is, Chris, those are very complicated problems of which nobody really knows the solution. Like, yeah, the solution is exercise and and eat less. Easier said than done, my
True.
friend. And
Definitely.
particularly when it comes to parents and small
And
children
kids, yeah.
and people living in poverty and all of these things. Like those are very complicated problems. But the idea of, hey, if somebody is seeking STI testing, test them in all the places they could have these things. That seems like a pretty obvious problem that seems like something that's easily solvable. It could be as solvable as educating physicians about this and other clinicians about this. And so that's why I started my company, is because it was the only way that I could personally address the problem. Now, my company is not huge, and believe me, every day, thousands of people across the United States get an STI test that does not include a throat swab. But we're doing the best that we can in terms of education and YouTube and our podcast and interviews like this. I mean, if nobody ever goes to shamelesscare.com after this interview, but there's maybe a clinician listening, maybe there's a nurse practitioner in Iowa listening to us right now, and she's going to go, you know what? He's right about that. We should be doing oral swabs. Then this was, then this was well worth my time to do this interview.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's right. We can reach one person, or somebody says, hey, you know what? Let me do that. The education of it. So let me be clear. The STI is the test. The STD is the disease, or whatever we want to say. Is that correct?
No, these terms, they've just gotten more.
Yeah, please educate us on that.
And I don't like this term, but they've just gotten more woke over time. It started out as venereal disease, and people didn't like the way that sounded. So then it changed to sexually transmitted disease, and now as a society, we've decided we don't like the way that sounds. So now it's sexually transmitted infection. I don't know that it makes any difference in reality, but these are just, I've sort of trained myself to say STI now because that is the preferred name now. But it is confusing to people who still think of STDs. Absolutely.
Well, this is it, because sometimes people don't say, hey, there's new vocabulary that's happening for blood. We just hear the term, and like no one is actually educating to say, this is the new update about the terminology in today's time. So thank you for educating us and all the people who are listening, because I'm sure everyone will have the same, like, really? Some people will know, but some people won't. So let me ask you, if you could change one thing about how STI testing is done today, what would it be?
I think a phrase that people use a lot is a phrase called full panel. And so people who are seeking STI testing for whatever reason, somebody's recently divorced and now they're dating again, you name it. They go to their physician and they want to be STI tested. They'll often say, I would like an STI test, or I would like a full panel STI test. And what people are imagining is that physician knows exactly what to do from that point forward. But if you look at the doctors, at least in the United States, Chris, they're always looking at their laptop. They're not really looking at you most of the time. They're frantically trying to type notes during the 3 minutes they have in the exam room. And they're looking at this software program. And there is no button that says full panel STI test. What they have to do is imagine all of the sexually transmitted infections that this person might possibly have in all of the locations, and hold that information in their brain as they hunt around the lab ordering, software, and click each individual box. And so, for example, at our STI testing at shamelesscare.com, there's 14 different sexually transmitted infections. So you can imagine how difficult it would be to remember all 14 of those sexually transmitted infections in order to those tests. And so I think that people need to not overestimate how much their physician knows about this topic, and take a little bit more ownership themselves and really think through and study, which is super easy to do now with the AI engines and things like that.
True.
What they might want to have included in an STI panel, and then bring that information to their doctor, who may or may not order those tests, but at least you're in a stronger position than if you just leave it entirely up to them. Because the truth is, if you went to 10 different doctors and asked each of them for a full panel STI test, you would end up with 10 slightly different tests. And that would surprise people. Absolutely.
Well, this is it. This is why people go and get a second opinion, right? They go to someone else to feel like, are you going to give me some different, diagnosis compared to the doctor that I have? And sometimes it is, right? Sometimes you go to a different doctor and they've got a whole different ordeal to say about the situation compared to the doctor you've come from. So, and then the patient is like, well, what am I supposed to do? Right.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. Well, you imagine a physician is going to know everything about everything, and they are brilliant people. I mean, these are people who were the smartest kids in elementary school and junior high and high school, and I mean, they're the gifted. There's no doubt about it. You can't pass medical school and become a physician unless you're incredibly gifted and work incredibly hard. I'm not taking a thing away from them. But the truth is, if you think about a family physician, one person comes in with a sprained ankle. The next person comes in, she has a lump in her breast. The next person comes in, he has a cold. Then the next person comes in and, is worried he might have contracted an STI. It's like, how could you possibly know everything about everything? And the other thing I'll say about it, Chris, is that if somebody comes into the exam room and has symptoms, that's easier. That's an easier path to follow. Like, oh, I'm having trouble. This hurts. And I'm worried it might be XYZ infection. A physician can easily walk through that and figure that out. But a very open-ended question of, hey, I'm dating again and I want to make sure that I don't have any infections that I might possibly pass along to somebody else. Please test me for everything possible. Sex positive person. I think that life is very short and it can be very cruel at times, Chris. And sex for a lot of people is in different cultures and different religions. I completely respect those. But for a lot of us, sex is just a really cool and fun and healthy activity. And so I never want to, have this conversation about STIs and leave people frightened. Don't
have sex.
So I'm going to answer your question, but first I just want to put some perspective on this. Okay.
Excellent.
So I had a gonorrhea infection of which I didn't even know I had. That's how little it was impacting my body. I had no idea I was sick. And it's just a simple bacteria infection that was cured with antibiotics. No different than strep throat or, if you've ever had a bacterial infection in your life that required antibiotics to fix it, you contracted that from somebody else. And so whether that comes from sex or not is really not this moral black and white issue that people think it is. A bacterial infection is a bacterial infection. It's not an indictment on your life or anything like that. So I don't want to frighten anybody about these. If anything, I hope that people listen to me and feel better about STIs, if that makes sense. But the biggest mistake, Chris, to answer your question, and it is a good one, is they assume that if they get a full panel, a negative test result, that means that they don't have a sexually transmitted infection. But the truth is most people, sorry for the double negative, most people do not know what they were not tested for.
Oh, wow.
It's a little bit like, I've never failed the bar exam, the exam to become a licensed attorney. I've never failed a bar exam in my life. Well, I've also never taken the bar exam. And I think a lot of people,
I get it.
They go get an STI test and they're like me, hey, hooray, it's negative. Life moves on, but it wasn't because they weren't tested for all the things that they could have had.
Wow. What an eye opener, to say the least. So tell us a little bit more about your company, Shameless Care. Where did the name come from? Why did you decide on that? Let's hear a word from one of our sponsors, Body and Voice Studios. Want to improve your singing, strengthen your vocal projection, or refine your diction? Now, you can take voice lessons from anywhere in the world with Body and Voice Studios. Their expert vocal coaches offer personalized online lessons so you can learn to sing from the comfort of your home, no matter where you are. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced singer, they'll give you the tools and understanding you need to use your voice with confidence. Mention Glass Half Full Podcast and receive 10% off your first trial lesson online. Visit www.bodyandvoicestudios.com to get started today. Again, visit www.voicestudios.com.
I just think that the name fits what we're trying to do. When shame gets involved in situations, then people can feel panicked or rushed or, the only way you're going to get quality health care is to not feel shame about the reason why you're seeking health care. That can make people be not quite as honest with their physician and just a lot of problems with that. And so the name just made sense when somebody first proposed that to me. I was just like, oh, that's it.
Okay, someone gave it to you. Okay.
Yeah, I just think it makes total sense. Shameless Care, I think, is a a great name for a company like ours. I think it fits exactly what we're trying to do. So telehealth at the end of the day is a pretty simple business, Chris. We're connecting patients with physicians and then with a lab or with a pharmacy. So we do medications as well. And that might be the easier way for people to think about this. So let's say that somebody approaches us and it's a woman and she has a bacterial vaginosis infection.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody in the audience doesn't know what that is, it doesn't matter. She has an infection of which she knows what it is. She's had it before and she needs treatment. And so they go to shamelesscare.com. We connect them with one of our board certified physicians. So we have a team of physicians that are licensed in every state in the United States. And that patient typically fills out a medical intake form. Some states require a synchronous visit where that might be a video call or a phone call, but in most of them, you can have an asynchronous visit where you essentially fill out some forms with your information and then a doctor reviews that.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, the doctor will either approve the treatment or deny the treatment or, ask some follow-up questions, things like that. And if the treatment is approved, then the prescription is sent electronically to the local pharmacy that the patient chose. Likewise, with STI testing, if a patient wants to be screened for STIs, they can choose which STI testing panel they prefer. Then they fill out a medical intake form, which asks them some really smart questions like, have you ever been treated for syphilis before? Are you on any HIV preventative medications? What allergies do you have? What other meds are you on? And people are always like, why would you ask all of those questions? Well, our physicians also treat patients. So if somebody does have something like a chlamydia infection, for example, they'll just send the prescription right to the local person's pharmacy. But anyway, the doctor reviews the medical information, orders the testing kit, and the testing kit, and this is really cool, actually goes to the patient's home.
Oh, wow.
And there they collect their own samples right there in the privacy of their home. So they're never having to go to, to a kind of a tough phlebotomist's office, like I was telling you.
Well, there's no shame,
like,
right?
I don't know.
There's no sense of being embarrassed of because it is even to walk in those offices. Everybody knows why everybody's there, but there's still embarrassment. You can feel it in the air, So, wow, awesome. Please continue.
So they collect the samples in their home and then they mail them to the lab.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 days after it reaches the lab, the lab gives the results to the physician and the physician shares them with the patient. And so it's something that people can truly do from home, which is really, really cool. And I think is the future of medicine in a lot of ways. I think telehealth is only going to grow. And I think people doing labs and things like that from the comfort of their own home is absolutely the future.
Now, does it take insurance? How does that work about the payment? Are people paying like cash or not cash, but paying a payment like when they get their arrival? How does that work? Does the insurance company come into play with this or no?
We don't use insurance, Chris, and the reason why, and I had to make this decision early on in the process, but what STI tests various insurance companies will cover depends upon so many things, including what state the person lives in,
wow.
their gender, their sexuality.
Oh, wow.
It's extremely complicated. And, I think some of your listeners have probably had this experience where you go to the doctor, you get your blood drawn, the doctor gives you some information, whatever. And then, 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, you get a random bill from the laboratory, which you've never even heard of before, but it's the lab that your doctor sent. This happens in the United States anyway, Chris. You may not be subject to this.
No, we don't. Anymore. This doesn't happen here, but yeah, you're right. I've lived in America long enough. They send that bill. That bill.
Yeah, you get this random bill from a lab you've never even heard of before, and it can be for, $300, $500, $800. It's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And, so for that reason, we just accept, it is called cash in this business, though obviously it's a credit card or a debit card or something like that. You're doing it online. But that way people know exactly what it costs right up front, and there's no surprises. They're never going to get an additional bill from a lab or something like that. And if we accepted insurance, the truth is, Chris, some people would get that covered by their insurance. Others would end up getting a bill later that cost way more than what we charge now. So the only way to really control anymore in 2026 what something is actually going to cost the patient is to just not accept insurance.
Well, I get it. So since that time that you've had this experience with this, have you ever had a STI since then?
I haven't, Chris, and
Oh,
I
that's
I have been
good.
non-monogamous
Thank you for
for a
thank you for
long
your
time.
honesty, Rob. Thank you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
thank you for your honesty. Okay, that's good. And I'm sorry, you were saying that you are a monogamous. Did you say monogamous now?
No, no, I was just gonna say that I've been non-monogamous
Oh,
for
okay,
a
no.
long time, and that was the only STI that I'd ever contracted, and I don't know that I'll contract another one again.
Are you
What's
still this
surprising to
way now,
people,
non-monogamous,
yes,
even though
yeah,
you're
but
married?
I think right.
Okay.
I think what people would be surprised to know is how low our STI rate, positivity rate is at shamelesscare.com. So we advertise on a lot of different types of podcasts and things like that, Chris. And for example, we have people who are customers who this is like their thing. This is like their hobby. This is what they like to do. They like to
Have
hook up with
sex.
people, and it's so easy for people to think, oh, they must be spreading all kinds of diseases. Our overall positivity rate across all infections at shamelesscare.com is except for herpes simplex virus, which is pretty much universal at this point. We can talk more about that if you want, but
Hmm.
excluding that one is less than 1%. And that is a tiny fraction of the general population in the United States. And I think it's because people who, interact with us and our YouTube channel and our podcast and might order testing from us or whatever it is, they're really progressive and careful and educated.
Hmm.
And STIs, like every other poor health outcome in the United States, is intimately linked with income and education.
Hmm.
And so people's income and education and the network of people that they might be intimate with matters so much more than the number of partners that somebody might have. And that's really interesting, and it's counterintuitive to what most people think. And this is an incredibly nuanced subject, Chris. A lot of people hear consensual non-monogamy and they're like, well, that's really weird. But then if they think about their own life, maybe they were dating somebody 2 years ago, and that was the love of their life,
Hmm.
and they were intimate with that person. But something happened 8 months after that, and they broke up. And then there was a new love of their life that came along. And 4 months after that, oh, that didn't work out too well either. And then now there's a third person. And so that's not everybody's story, of course, Chris, but there's something called serial monogamy where, yeah, that person's monogamous, but if you looked back over the past 5, 10 years of their life, like there's been a few partners, and the end result is the same. You're somewhat exposed to STIs in a very similar way.
Mm. Question for you. What do you think about now there's preventative medicines that you can take for stopping catching of HIV and some of the other, I think oxypoxy, I forget what it's called. There's another one that
Mm-hmm.
people are taking with it. What is your opinion about that? Are you for it? Do you think that it's something great? Do you think that people still should be using protection with that? What is your opinion about that?
I think that,
PrEP is the name. Sorry, I couldn't think of it.
yeah, yeah. Well, Chris, when I was young, HIV and AIDS was a nightmare. I mean, it was killing people. People would find out they had this, and 9, 10 months later, they would pass
Yeah, it was
away,
a
and it
whole different
wasn't an easy
ordeal.
death.
It was
It was
disgusting.
horrible,
Yeah.
and that still happens to people even today in various places around the world, and even in the United States for
Well,
people who for some reason just aren't having access to health care. There's resources available to those folks, but people might be unhoused or living in crisis or what have you. But my point is that is such a miracle. I mean, that was developed by the United States government and the pharmaceutical company Gilead, and it has saved countless people from around the world.
mm,
And I don't think people think about that enough or appreciate it enough. It's something that all of us should be so thankful for, even if PrEP is not something that makes sense in our lives in particular, because this was such a nightmare that was just now 100% preventable. And
mm,
that is an absolute miracle. And,
definitely.
and so I think that, when people question it, like, well, now people have this tool, so they're not even using condoms anymore. My response to that would be, what is the alternative to not have it? And if If some gay men, right? And if gay men who had to fear for their life every time they had sex from the early 1980s until 2012 when PrEP was developed, if this gives them such a sense of freedom and that they sometimes feel like they can have sex without condoms, then I mean, honestly, I think that's probably a positive thing overall.
Okay.
And so I think PrEP is a miracle, and the government, the United States government, does not get enough credit for the development of PrEP and for buying millions of doses of it and sending it around the world. I mean, we certainly have our problems in the United States. No country is perfect, but that is really a gift to the world that I don't think people appreciate enough. DoxyPep is a different story because with PrEP, you don't really have. So for listeners who might not be familiar, PrEP is a medication that people can take every day, or there's also now an injectable version. And essentially, it takes someone's risks of HIV down to practically zero. Even if someone was exposed to HIV multiple times, their risk is practically zero if they're on PrEP, this medication that can prevent HIV. There's also now medications that can treat HIV and make people who are HIV positive what's known as U equals U, which means undetectable and untransmittable, which is also just another miracle. These drugs are basically the same, just used differently, by the way, but that's beside the point. So imagine someone finds out that they have HIV in 1984. They're probably going to pass away in very short order. And today they can take medications that make the virus so under control that it can't even be detected in a blood test. And it's impossible for them to transmit it to another person. Now, DoxyPep, on the other hand, is a different medication for a different purpose. DoxyPep is the antibiotic doxycycline, which has been around for about 50 years. And if you take a single dose of it after sex, it pretty dramatically lessens the likelihood of contracting gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis. And there are concerns with that medication about antibiotic resistance, because if you think about it, everybody listening to me right now has always been told to finish your antibiotics. Finish your antibiotics. Even when you feel better, finish your antibiotics. It's right there on the bottle that you get from the pharmacy.
It's true.
But now we're telling people, well, you know what? Take this antibiotic whenever you want. You can take a dose now. You can take a dose next week. Just whenever you get laid, and forgive me for being a little crass, go ahead and take a dose of this antibiotic. And so there is need for caution there. Because it could lead to additional antibiotic resistance. And that is something that is being studied continuously. Using doxycycline to prevent bacterial infections is nothing new. People have been using doxycycline to prevent malaria in places in the world where malaria still exists for, decades. People use doxycycline after tick bites in the United States to prevent Lyme disease. And so now we do that in the United States and in other places in the world to help prevent some of the bacterial STIs. But the jury is still out about if that is a good public health move or not long term. And the reason why it might not be is because of antibiotic resistance.
Wow. And does it take away the HIV as well, or no?
No, it only reduces the risk, but doesn't eliminate the risk of gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis, which are three bacterial STIs.
Got it. Break it down for us, Robert. Break it down. Yes. I love it when people can spoon feed it because, everybody doesn't know all of this, So it's nice when people can really get the full understanding. And so when people know what they're talking about, it's nice when you can just lay it out. Yeah. Nice. And thank you for sharing the breakdown of all three of them as well, giving their names and what's happening with it so people can really understand the difference about them as well. So thank you for breaking that into it. So let me change a little bit. Let me ask you, for parents who are listening, what do you think about the conversations about sexual health should begin? When do you think that they should begin? At what age? And then I have a part 2 to that is I want to know, how can they avoid about making it awkward? Because that's what a lot of people have. Lord knows my mom didn't talk to me about it. Because she didn't feel comfortable about it. Bless you. I love you, Mom. She's not listening anyway. But yeah, anyway. So please, for the parents listening.
Oh, Chris, I wish I had the answer to that. I really don't, and I'm a
Okay, when
father
did you
myself.
talk about your
But
experience then. When did you
well,
share with your child?
I'd like to share with the audience another experience that I have. So
Okay.
we were going through an adoption process, and we met a young woman who was in medical school, and she had found herself with an unexpected pregnancy,
Hmm.
and she was looking to place her baby into adoption. And in talking to her, it became obvious to me that the reason why she felt like she needed to make this decision is because she couldn't tell her parents. And she was, like I said, in medical school, so she was probably like 26 or 27 years old.
Oh, she wasn't a kid.
And no, she wasn't a kid. And I've always just felt as if this idea that we tell our young people, don't have sex, and by the way, if you get pregnant, I'll kill you. Like that is honestly the way that some people have that
Don't
conversation.
bring no baby up in here. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I just, forgive me. This is just my opinion from my life experiences. I
Hmm.
just feel like there's almost no good that can come from that. Because if that child ends up in some sort of trouble where they really need mom and dad again, like that young woman did, they have nowhere else to go.
You go to
You've
the
already
streets.
taken that away from
Yeah.
them. And and so I'll never forget that. And so I don't know the perfect time to sit down and have a conversation with young people or children about sex, Chris, but I can tell you this. What I'm going to spend time telling my daughter rather than you better not get pregnant. You better not, I'll kill your boyfriend if I want her to know that I love her very much and she can always come to me. And I will always do my best to help her. And I think that people kind of lose track of that as your responsibility as a parent, not to threaten and make sure they know that they will have no help when in fact they need it.
Okay, now, Robert, how old is your child? May I ask?
She's 10.
Okay, because you talking, I was like, you not giving me full truth. Now, as the dad, as I say, it would be your job to talk to her about the male having condoms. I talked to my niece about having condoms on them, that we went to
Mm-hmm.
the store so they knew what to get, all of this stuff. And I was like, they need to know this information because the guys are going to play the game. They're going to be like, oh, I don't have it, or I don't have it. And that's when she can pull into her bag and
Yeah.
say, oh, okay, I have one, and understand about what it is. So I think that for a dad, I think it's definitely your place to share that with your daughter when it becomes time, whenever you feel that it's time for her to know about it. She's 10, so I get it. But,
Mm-hmm.
interesting enough, it would be something that the mom would be a little weird for the mom to be talking about with the child. In my personal opinion, I don't have children, so I'm speaking freely, but I am a teacher and I do have young nieces. So, but I think that, early is better than late because the internet is already talking about it. At school, they're already talking about it. And so if kids can have the knowledge and information early, then they can understand how to use it when negative things are thrown their way that or lies are told. They understand, they can stand firm in their truth. So awesome. Thank you for sharing your truth about that with, when you're ready to share for your child as well. So let me ask you, if someone is dating today, what are 3 things they should know about STI testing that most people don't?
That's a great question. So, three things would be that most STIs are asymptomatic. So people are continuously wanting us to talk about, okay, what are the symptoms of mycoplasma genitalium, for example? And your audience is never going to have heard that word before.
I'm
They
like,
don't
I've
have to
never heard
remember
that word before.
it. And we don't really like to talk about symptoms too much because the truth is the biggest symptom is no symptom at all. So if you're
Oh,
sitting
wow.
around waiting for this magical symptom, that's not really as helpful as you might think.
Mm,
The second thing is that oral sex can certainly spread a lot of STIs. It doesn't seem to spread HIV very readily or hepatitis B, but certainly the bacterial STIs, of which we spent a lot of time talking about, and those are the ones that are much more common, by the way. Oral sex can spread those STIs,
hmm
quite well. And the third one is that we do have, and I think you were asking about the third one, Chris, is that vaccinations are absolutely key. We talked about PrEP earlier being a medical miracle. And the HPV vaccine has been as well. And so if your audience isn't familiar, HPV, human papilloma virus, is a family of viruses. There's about 200 or so. And most of them are harmless so far as science knows right now, but some of them are quite harmful and can cause cancer, cervical cancer, oropharyngeal squamous cell carcinoma of the throat, penile cancer, anus cancer. These are serious health matters. And this has always just been something that we had to live with. But starting in 2006, there was the HPV vaccine, which in the United States, young girls started getting in 2006, and then boys a little bit later.
Oh, the boys did get it. Okay, I didn't know that.
The boys did get it. Yeah, and it's been miraculous. You know, in England, I saw a story out of England the other day that said this was the first time where there's been a 5-year period in England where there hasn't been any cervical cancer deaths among young women. The cervical cancer rates in the developed world are dropping by huge amounts.
Wow.
Everybody listening to me right now you probably do have a woman alive in your life right now because of that vaccine. Now, you won't know who she is because she never developed cancer and you never heard about it. But without that vaccine, it may well have happened. And so I just think that people, particularly people who missed those vaccinations when they were young, it's not too late now. If you're someone that is sexually active, you may want to talk to your physician about getting the HPV vaccine and the hepatitis B vaccine as well, because those are two STIs with serious health complications that you can basically
avoid.
Pretty well check off the list. Yeah, with just a simple vaccination.
My niece received it when she was like growing up. I remember that being like, what? Yeah, because it wasn't something that was happening when we were kids. So, but yeah, I remember that they were getting, that's why I didn't know about the boys. I don't have any nephews, but yeah, the girls did get it for that. Wow.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny how these vaccinations change. It's like, well, why did we only start off giving it to girls? Why didn't we start off giving it to boys as well at the same time? But that's a decision they made at that time and then quickly corrected it.
Well, thank God for the correction. This is where we're at. You know what I mean? It's okay that they didn't, whatever, but thank you for the correction, feeling like everybody can be on the same board of being, free and not having anything to deal with that. So, let me ask you, are there any questions that patients might be too embarrassed to ask but should?
Yes, well, particularly around erectile dysfunction, that seems to be where people also have a big hang up.
Let's break this down. I can guess it, but let's break it down, please.
Well, what people don't realize is that a lot of erectile dysfunction can be mental, and it can be context dependent and partner dependent. For example, Chris, when we talk about condoms and STIs, I saw a study recently where they looked at condom-induced erectile dysfunction. And these are men who, they normally don't have erectile dysfunction, but there's something about reaching for that condom, opening the condom, all of that process that causes them to lose their erection.
Wow.
And now
there's a name for this?
Sound like just there's a name for everything.
You know what? You're right. What is this called?
Yeah. Condom-induced erectile dysfunction.
What?
Yeah. So a lot of men don't really have any trouble, but if you think about it, Chris, sex is a very kind of, it's a brainstem level sort of, just ingrained in the human DNA drive. Mm-hmm. But when you go to rummage through your backpack or whatever and find that condom and open it up, you're really transitioning back to this cognitive process that is a little bit different than sex itself. And that can cause some men to lose their erection. They get a little bit flustered or whatever. Wow. But my point is, Chris, the study, what was really profound to me is what the men did afterwards.
What did they do?
Because a lot of the men still had sex. They just had sex without a condom. And
this
then
was the push.
I have to think that, I have to imagine there might have been some coercion at that point and things like that, because here's their partner who intended to have condom protected sex. But when the male couldn't perform and got embarrassed and probably flustered and who knows what, maybe even angry, they were like, oh, okay, well, let's just do it without it. And that's not okay. And so I think what people need to be open and honest with their physician about is, be open and honest. Like this, I don't have this problem. I'm still getting erections in the morning. Everything seems to be working fine. But when I'm in this particular situation with this particular person, then I struggled. And that's hard to do. It's hard to get into that kind of nuance, but that can really help the physician better understand what's happening.
This is true. I mean, definitely being honest about what's really going on, then they can give their best, information about it. Understandably so. Wow. I want to talk about your podcast. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, successful podcasts.
Well, it's not exactly Joe Rogan, but we're doing the best we can, and we have a lot of fun doing it.
This is not Joe Rogan either, but everybody's got their own mission. No competition. There's enough that we can share. Yes. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. Well, our podcast is called Sex is Good.
Is it?
And it's a podcast where we, hopefully it is. Yeah.
Right.
And it's a podcast where we talk a lot about the science of sex. So it's not just STIs, but it is very much a science-based podcast. So we'll talk about the recent studies about different things. It might be orgasm or human connection or, you name it. We'll talk about it and we'll break it down completely from a science point of view. And so at the heart of it, it's a science podcast, but it's also a podcast that's about sex. And it's something that we get a lot of enjoyment out of. It's something where you can have deep conversations, as you know, Chris. I think that's the best thing about the podcast is you can have deep conversations about things in a way that really isn't conducive to Instagram. If you don't hook somebody immediately with how you look or some crazy trick you're doing on Instagram, everybody's gone in half a second. You don't have time to have a conversation. And that's what I think is so brilliant about the podcast medium.
So true. You do have a chance to really bring people in on serious topics, mature topics where people can have, it's just more real and more honest, I feel. And like you say, when we're on some of the other platforms, you can't help but see how people are dressed and what they have on and what's in the background. There's lots of distractions for the eyes. And so this way, when there's no distraction, we're forced to really listen in a deeper way. And even if people are viewing as well, nothing wrong with that. I have a few podcasts that I love to watch as well. But there's just more work that's going into it. And ideally, as long as the message is getting out in the end, that's what's really is important. So we love that. How long has your podcast been going?
We started in May of 2025. So I guess 14 months. Yeah. And we have a YouTube channel as well. And again, YouTube is kind of a nice medium because there's an algorithm, first of all, unlike podcasting. So a video can kind of catch on, if it's good enough.
Very true.
And yeah. And also people are seeking out information on YouTube in a way that they don't really seem to be seeking out information on Instagram and things like that. You can tell I'm not very good at Instagram and I kind of have some sour grapes about it.
Well, hey, let's say that we are getting better at it, unless you plan to let it go, then that's fine. Robert, you can't be great at everything now. Come on now. Work in progress is always good. Definitely, for sure. I like to ask all my guests this final question. Is your glass half empty or half full?
My glass is definitely half full. I am so thankful that we live in a time where we can share information and we can challenge things. And that's really particularly important in my line of work because something negative happened to me, but I have the opportunity to do what I can to fix it. And that to me is what makes life worth living. I mean, I love the freedom to try to help other people. And I'm really optimistic about the future, my own future, the future of my family, future of the business, future of sexual health care. I'm optimistic. I'm bullish on all of it, as they say.
I love that. If one listener could pull out one message from this sexual health chat that we've had, what would you want to leave them with? What kind of final thought would you want to leave the listeners with?
I would say that if you are sexually active, to try to separate guilt from the realities of the healthcare situation. As I stated earlier, Chris, if somebody is at risk of very serious STIs like HIV, we have medications now that can take that risk basically away.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody is avoiding testing because they're worried they might have something like chlamydia or something along those lines, these are relatively harmless infections if they're tested and treated in the short term. And they certainly do not have any impact whatsoever on if you're a good person or a bad person. They're just simple bacterial infections that have been spreading for a very long time and will continue to do so in the future.
I love that. I love that. Do you feel that you're doing your life's work, your purpose?
That's a great question.
It's okay if you
in my
can't
life,
answer it
I've
now.
done.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, in my life, I've done several things. It's hard for me. Chris, I'm like the only person my age that I know that doesn't have a tattoo, and it's because I've just never.
Wait,
I've
okay.
never
Can we
thought of
ask how old
oh,
are you? Because you keep throwing out these number references. How old are you, Robert? Let's put it out.
I'm 46.
Oh my gosh, Robert! I'm older than you. I don't have a tattoo either, so
Really?
I'm in the bandwagon with you. Now I have a lot of fake tattoos that I put on and they come off with alcohol, but yeah, I don't have a real tattoo either. Okay, go ahead. I just wanted to see how old you are. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, my point is, like when I was young and when I was young, everybody was getting these tribal tattoos around their biceps, right?
Yes,
like all
yes,
my
it was
friends
very
were,
popular.
This was the late 1990s.
Yes.
And I just thought the odds of me still being into that in 10 years, 20 years is near zero. Meanwhile, all of my friends are like, oh, dude, this is always going to be cool. I'm getting this right now. So my life work is always sort of changing. This is what I'm really super passionate about right now because of the personal thing that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think my lifetime passion is not necessarily sexual health. I think it is public health. I've spent my career in public health. I think that health is wealth, and the truth is that at least in the United States, your health primarily depends upon your income and your area code. And that's really unfortunate. And so I think that my life work is helping people live healthier lives. Right now, that is sexual health. Who knows what it'll be in 20 years. Hopefully this whole idea of no one getting oral swabs is just not even a problem. And I can move on to something else.
Right. You're educating. You're an educator. You're an educator, maybe among many things, but you're definitely an educator. Super amazing chat today. Thank you for the time coming out to just share all of this amazing information. And like you spoon fed us. I feel like somebody's just bibbed me up, wiped my chin because you really gave it to us easy. We could understand so fluidly. Thank you for all of your breakdown, and thank you for your service and what you're doing for the people, the knowledge that you're giving and the understanding about feeling that, about things being shameless, right? That we can shamelessly care for ourselves and get the understanding with it. So we thank you, Robert, for your time today.
Well, thank you, Chris. You're fantastic at this, by the way. You've picked up a new listener because I could listen to you all day, and I love your positive energy. So
Robert.
I'm not sure what made you grab that podcast mic to begin with, but I certainly hope that you continue to do it because you have a real gift for this.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. And today is our 4th year anniversary of the podcast. So it has been 4 years today that I have started this. So it's just been a blessing, and I'm so grateful. So thank you for those lovely and kind words for today. Can you tell everyone if they want to reach you and find out more about you? How can they do it? Where do they go? They want to know about Shameless Care. Tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to shamelesscare.com, and then also on Instagram, it's Shameless Care Official, and on YouTube, it is Shameless Care Official as well. And the podcast is Sex is Good because I realized that when people are searching Spotify, Shameless Care is not going to mean anything to them. So I try to get a little different name there.
Smart man.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. And all this information will be listed underneath the episode, so that way everyone can easily access it and find it there. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you for being the guest here on Glass Half Full.
Thank you. It was really fun.
My pleasure. You have a wonderful and awesome day ahead.
You too.
Thank you.
Hello, listeners of Glass Half Full. Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of our podcast. I'm your host, Chris Levins, and I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for being a part of our supportive community. Remember, Glass Half Full is not just a podcast. It's a safe platform for everyone to share their life experiences. Your stories and voice matter, and we appreciate you for being here with us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our future content, please subscribe, follow, and rate our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners who can benefit from these valuable life experiences. As we wrap up this episode, always keep in mind, you are blessed. No matter the challenges you face, there's a reservoir of strength within you. Until next time, stay positive. And remember, the glass is always half full. See ya!